Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 3 of season 1 of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. called The Asset. And there's a lot of little elements in this episode that I think work well, but for whatever reason I just wasn't quite feeling it with this episode. Uh, it just didn't really have a moment that really made me go wow, I guess, is what I'm really trying to say here. But anyway, let's just kind of get right into it. First of all, one thing I want to say, did you notice that those little water bottles that everybody was drinking out of this episode? Did you notice that they had the S.H.I.E.L.D. logo on them as well? So apparently S.H.I.E.L.D. even slaps its logo on its own provided bottled water. I guess they're just too good to go out and buy Evian. They have to have top secret water or something like that. But anyway, it's a cute touch, and I definitely like that. Anyway, so the main thing that we're introduced here from the Marvel Universe is the character of Franklin Hall. I don't recall if he was Canadian in the official Marvel Universe, but I suppose it's ultimately irrelevant. But anyway, in the Marvel Universe, Franklin Hall is the super villain known as Graviton, and he is considered to be a pretty heavy hitter. I've only read about one or two stories with him, but he's the kind of guy that even other superheroes, the stories I read with him, like some of the superheroes involved were like, I don't think we're going to be able to take this guy. We need to go and maybe get some other people or some backup. Now, granted, the heroes in question were the Great Lakes Avengers, and yes, in the Marvel Universe, there is actually a team called the Great Lakes Avengers. And, well, folks, just go and look them up. They're one of those elements from comics that I would just feel horribly embarrassed to explain because they're actually kind of ridiculous. But yeah, it actually ultimately was a rather good story from the pages of Thunderbolts. Really, really good series from the late 90s if you ever want to check that out. So anyway, now here, of course, Franklin Hall is presented as basically a good person who's doing something. He's taking things to an extreme, but for a good reason. And Hall raises some really good points about, how S.H.I.E.L.D. are not always the good guys. He even blatantly points out that them trying to exploit the Tesseract as a power source led to Earth getting invaded, led to billions of dollars and who knows how many people dying in New York. And now Earth is on the radar of the Chitauri, aka the Skrulls, and Thanatos. Now, of course, they don't know about Thanatos and its S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Avengers or anything, but still, not good. Not good at all. And, it is a fair question that, what else has S.H.I.E.L.D. done that has ultimately not helped people? What has S.H.I.E.L.D. done that is unwittingly brought disaster to the world? You got to figure there's probably more than a few things that have been swept under the rug by Nick Fury and who knows who else when things didn't go well. You got to wonder if maybe Coulson isn't one of those things. Muscle memory. I like how one thing I have to say though is I like how Matilda May seems to be the person who's most picking up that there's just something not right about Coulson. This is obviously a smart lady, and she's really good at picking up on these little things, which I think, of course, makes her an extremely interesting character. And of course, her arc this episode was basically feeling helpless on the plane, not being able to do anything, and how it drives her crazy, which of course ultimately leads to her requesting to be returned to her status as a field agent. Now, of course, I don't think this is really going to be a surprise to anybody, but still, it was an earned change for the character. Not a huge amount to say about Fitz and Simmons this time around. Now, they're obviously being former students of Dr. Hall and having a great deal of respect for him, a strong desire to want to help him. That was okay, but it ultimately really just more panned out as not really anything that added to their characters so much as it made a nice note when when Coulson tried to reason with Hall by invoking their names. It didn't ultimately work, but it was still a nice touch. And let's see. But once again, the focus here really is more about. Well, this is another one that's really heavy on the things going on with Skye and her interaction with Ward. Now, I like how this episode does remind us that Ward's people skills are pretty, well, in the assessment of Maria Hill, pretty poop. But here, and what we've seen in the previous episodes, is that Ward seems to be making a genuine effort with Skye, and not just probably because he's attracted to her. He honestly does seem to see real potential in her. But here, he's not really gonna let that get in the way of making sure that she has what it takes to survive out in the field. Now, he's obviously seen, like from last episode, that she can think quickly. I mean, Skye did basically save his life, which of course probably has no small amount of effect on how Ward is, taking seriously, making sure that she has the skills to survive out there in the field. I can't imagine him not thinking that, hey, she saved my life. The least I can do to try and repay her is to make sure that she has the skills to someday save her own life. And I also certainly did like that we get to see a little bit of insight into Ward and where he comes from. We get to learn about his moment when he decided what kind of man he wanted to be. And of course, we also start to get a little bit of insight into what's going on with Skye. Supposedly she's an orphan, she's from the South. But, is anyone else thinking that maybe this is all just a calculation on Skye's part? I mean, everything she did in the first episode was to basically get into S.H.I.E.L.D. And I really can't say that I would put it past her to sort of manipulate Ward in this fashion to come up with the sort of sob story that he would eat up. And also, if Skye went through all the trouble to raise her past the way she did, why is she going to start dropping these hints, even naming a foster family that she was in the care of at one point? The sort of thing that any competent S.H.I.E.L.D. Researcher could probably use to track down and figure out who she really is. It just doesn't make sense. Manipulation all around, huh? You have to wonder if Ward was telling the truth about the truth serum. If it was, that was certainly a brilliant move on the part of him and Coulson. And honestly, I could see that. They had to get Skye's trust, and, well, obviously they're not going to risk Ward telling her anything that's actually super important. See, this is a hallmark of really good writing, is when you can look back at things that are come as a shocking revelation and realize that it made sense all the time. And of course, we get to see another nice twist where it looks like Skye is going to sell out S.H.I.E.L.D. to that Ian, whatever his name, dude. No, it's all a carefully orchestrated move to get her to where she needs to be in order to use that high-tech compact thing in order to do what needs to get done. But again, that's just another reminder to us as the audience, I think, that Skye, there is a good reason not to trust Skye. There's a good reason not to think that, not to take what she's doing and what she's saying at face value. And we do need to keep that in mind. Skye has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. as part of some unknown agenda, and we don't know for who or for why, but it's probably not in the best interests of S.H.I.E.L.D. Anyway, let's kind of move on into things. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here to kind of figure out where I want to go first. Okay, let's talk about some metal here. First of all, when we find out that the rancher guy or whatever he was, he got paid in gold bars. Okay, exactly how does a guy walk into like a bank or something with a bunch of gold bars and expect to get cash for them? I mean, granted, there's probably places out there where, if you're familiar with all things shady, you can probably get that done. But this was just some dude selling some land equipment. Why would he know that? And really, accepting payment in that form is monumentally stupid. Especially seeing as how any legitimate place that deals in gold especially gold in substantial amounts, is going to be looking for some kind of a government mark or something like that. Now, they did say that they were able to determine through the chemical observation of the impurities, or chemical analysis of the impurities, where it came from, but that's still not in keeping with legit trade practices. Now, granted, as I said, this guy could have been going to the black market or something, but it just seems a little weird that some random cowboy out in Colorado would know where to go to do that. And speaking of which, this gravitonium element that they're talking about here, they say that it was found in some mine in Africa, which just really seems very weird to me. It really doesn't, in my mind, make sense to say that this was a naturally occurring element that they could just dig out of the ground. Now look, chemistry and stuff, really not my forte, but I am aware of things like synthetic elements. If you've ever heard of neptunium, or einsteinium, or europium, americium, yeah, and those are all real things. They are elements. But they're the kind of elements that you have to create in a lab, and it's not easy stuff. If they had said that this stuff was something like that, I mean, I think you can even see if you pay really close attention, I think you can even briefly see that this gravitonium is supposed to be element 123 on the periodic table. I'm not sure the periodic table quite goes that high, at least not here in the real world. But I freely admit that chemistry was not my best subject in school. Anyway, ultimately what I'm trying to say here is that if they just said it was a synthetic element, and they did seem to be making at least a half-hearted attempt to try and keep this somewhat within keeping with actual science, I think that would have made a lot more sense. But I'm going to leave it at that and leave it to the science and chemistry geeks to argue over. Let me see here. Wow, I really should practice reading my own handwriting more. Well, I don't really have anything to say about this Ian whatever guy who's in charge of what's going on here. Although I do have to say that what Coulson is saying about international law and what Ian says about having citizenship, I don't know if that's exactly true for Malta, but I do know that for some countries, what he's saying is actually completely true. I believe it's the Maldives that for $1 million you can buy Maldivian citizenship, and one of the perks that comes with that is that there is no extradition treaty between the Maldives and the United States. So obviously for some people out there who are into fishy business, that's quite an attractive thing. And I also like how it raises the idea that while S.H.I.E.L.D. is an international organization, their authority does not extend everywhere. It places limits. It creates complications for S.H.I.E.L.D. And that ultimately, of course, leads to potentially interesting stories. Now, since I'm familiar with the comics, I'm familiar with Graviton as a character, I saw what was going to happen with Hall falling into that thing from a mile away. I knew once I saw that big CGI glob of stuff that this was what was going to happen to the guy, because if it doesn't, there's no way that he can become Graviton. But I do appreciate that the show took the time to really give us a clear idea of who Franklin Hall was as a character, why he was willing to do these things. And we also realized that Hall has a legitimate point. You can honestly make the case that this guy was doing something brave. Maybe not heroic, since, yeah, destroying the estate like that probably would have killed some innocent people. But still, his criticisms of S.H.I.E.L.D. and what is going on there out in the world, and how so much of what is coming out in the Marvel universe, this world, in this time, is being exploited and used for bad purposes, and how he believed that there really was no way that what he had created wouldn't be misused. Well, those are all really legitimate concerns and very reasonable points. So it makes you wonder, when he comes back as full-fledged Graviton, which, let's face it, is pretty much inevitable at this point, what is he going to do then? Because he's locked away where S.H.I.E.L.D. keeps all the fun toys that are just too dangerous, and then well, what is a guy who has that kind of opinion of S.H.I.E.L.D. going to do when he finds out that he's in their Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse? Where does he go from there once he's out of that place? It's interesting stuff to think about. So again, while there were a lot of really good, strong elements, lots of funny moments, lots of good character moments, as I said, this episode just didn't quite have that spark that I was really looking for to make it truly an exceptional episode. But still, this is still a really fun hour of TV, and I'm definitely looking forward to more of it. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you this time around. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.